Captain Deho stared at his instruments with disbelief. The readings made no sense at all. His scaled fingers moved quickly across the control panel, checking and rechecking the data. The enormous energy barrier that had surrounded the Sol system for over 3,000 years was flickering like a dying light bulb. "This cannot be right," Deho muttered to himself. His reptilian eyes narrowed as he watched the massive wall of energy pulse and fade. Every species in the galaxy knew about the dead zone. It was one of the great mysteries the parents told their children about at bedtime. An entire star system locked away by the ancient architects, the mysterious race that had vanished long before most civilizations even discovered fire. The barrier had been absolutely perfect for millennia. Nothing got in. Nothing got out. Well, almost nothing. Strange radio signals had leaked through over the centuries. Music, voices, mathematical formulas. The beings inside called themselves humans, and they seemed to have no idea why they were trapped. Deho reached for his communication device. "This is Captain Deho of the Horizon's Edge to Central Command. I need to report something urgent. The Sol barrier is destabilizing." There was a long pause on the other end. Then a voice crackled through, full of skepticism. "Repeat that, Captain. Did you say the Sol barrier?" "Yes, Commander. I am watching it fail right now. It is flickering. I have never seen anything like this." Before the commander could respond, the entire barrier collapsed. It simply vanished in a silent wave of dissipating energy. Where there had been an impenetrable wall, now there was nothing but empty space and a yellow star with several planets orbiting peacefully. Deho sat in stunned silence. 3,000 years of mystery had just ended in a single moment. Within hours, every major government in the galaxy knew. The United Galactic Assembly called an emergency session. Deho received orders to maintain position and observe, but not to approach the system. Not yet. Near an abandoned research station at the edge of the former barrier zone, a human woman named Myre was having the shock of her life. She had spent 5 years studying the barrier from the outside, collecting data, analyzing the energy patterns. She had dedicated her entire career to understanding why Earth was locked away. Now her equipment was going crazy. Alarms blared throughout the small station. Myre ran to the observation window and pressed her hands against the cold glass. The shimmering wall that had dominated the view for as long as she could remember was simply gone. "Oh my God," she whispered. "It's really gone." Her research partner, Timon, rushed into the room. He was a former military pilot who had joined her team 2 years ago. His strong hands gripped her shoulders. "Myre, we need to get ready. The Assembly will send ships." "Lots of ships." Myre nodded, her mind racing. She had studied every scrap of information about Earth. The leaked transmissions. The old warning beacons that the architects had left floating in space. Those beacons all said the same thing in hundreds of languages. "Do not enter. Containment protocol active. Danger to all sapient life." But danger from what? Earth seemed peaceful in the transmissions. Humans were creative, curious, sometimes violent, but no more than most species. What could be so dangerous that it required locking away an entire world? The Galactic Assembly met in the Great Hall on Central Station. Representatives from 10,000 species argued back and forth. Some wanted to immediately quarantine the system again. Others insisted on making contact. A few suggested military action, fearing what might emerge from Earth now that it was free. Deho was called to testify about what he had witnessed. He stood before the Assembly and told them everything he had seen. The way the barrier had flickered and died. The complete silence from the human civilization inside. "Have they tried to make contact?" one representative asked. "No," Deho replied. "Our scans show extensive human activity. Cities, orbital stations, settlements on their moon. but they have not responded to any of our hailing signals. It is as if they are ignoring us completely. An old ambassador from the Krell species stood up. His body was covered in thick blue fur, and his voice was deep and serious. The architects did not create that barrier without reason. They were the most advanced civilization this galaxy has ever known. If they locked Earth away, we should respect that decision. But the vote went against isolation. The Assembly decided to send a diplomatic mission. They would approach Earth carefully, with peace as their intention. But they would get answers. Myray and Teeman were recruited as cultural liaisons. They knew more about human culture than almost anyone else in the galaxy. Together with Deho and representatives from 50 other species, they boarded the flagship Eternal Dawn and set course for Earth. The journey took 3 weeks. During that time, Myray watched the recordings of human transmissions over and over. Music videos from something called the 21st century. News broadcasts. Movies. She tried to understand these people, who had been alone for so long. When the fleet finally arrived in Earth's solar system, they found something unexpected. The human civilization was not primitive at all. Sleek ships patrolled between planets. Massive stations orbited Earth in perfect geometric patterns. Energy signatures suggested technology that was remarkably advanced in specific areas. Look at their power generation. Teeman pointed at his screen. That is quantum-level efficiency. Most species take 10,000 years to develop that. Deho nodded slowly. And their computational systems. Those are using principles that even we are still researching. But their propulsion technology is strangely basic. Like they advanced in specific directions only. The fleet established orbit around Earth. Myray looked down at the blue and green planet, feeling her heart race. Somewhere down there, humans were looking up at 50 alien ships and deciding what to do. The diplomatic team sent message after message. Simple mathematics. Universal greetings. Offers of peace. For 3 weeks, there was only silence. Then, on the 22nd day, a single human ship launched from the surface. It was small and elegant, moving with precise control. It approached the Eternal Dawn and requested permission to dock. Deho gave the order. The human ship settled into the docking bay. The airlock cycled. And for the first time in over 3,000 years, humans and aliens stood face to face. 3 humans emerged from their ship. The leader was a woman in her 50s with gray-streaked black hair pulled back severely. She wore a simple uniform without decoration. "I am Hai-Jin," she said in perfect galactic standard language. "Prime Coordinator of Earth, we have been expecting you." Hai-Jin walked through the corridors of the Eternal Dawn like she had done it 1,000 times before. Her 2 companions followed close behind. One was a stern-faced man named Junho, who kept his hand near his waist, where a strange device was attached. The other was a young woman named Sola, whose eyes were wide with wonder as she looked at everything around her. The diplomatic chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of species. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few looked like living crystals. Deho watched as Hai-Jin took her seat at the central table without any sign of fear or uncertainty. "Welcome to the galactic community," Deho began formally. "We have many questions about Earth and why your world was isolated for so long." Hai-Jin folded her hands on the table. Her expression remained calm and unreadable. "Our ancestors made a choice 3,000 years ago. We have honored that choice. That is all you need to know for now." The assembled representatives stirred with frustration. A tall insectoid ambassador clicked her mandibles impatiently. "That is not enough. The architects left warnings around your system. Warnings about danger to all sapient life." "What danger?" "The danger has been contained," Hai-Jin replied simply. "You are safe. We are safe. Nothing more needs to be discussed on this matter." Myre watched from the observation area above the main chamber. She felt Taman tense beside her. This was not going well. The assembly representatives were getting angry. They had traveled all this way for answers, and Hyjin was giving them nothing. Junho leaned close to Hyjin and whispered something. She nodded slightly. We understand your curiosity, but there are reasons for our silence. Reasons that have protected not just Earth, but all of you as well. Trust that we know what we are doing. Trust? The insectoid ambassador stood up sharply. How can we trust a species that has been hidden away like a disease? How can we trust people who refuse to explain themselves? Sola suddenly spoke up, her voice young but clear. Because we have lived with this burden for generations. Because our grandparents and their grandparents before them carried a secret that weighs on our entire world. Because we want peace, but we cannot give you what you are asking for. Not yet. Hyjin turned to look at Sola with a warning expression, but the younger woman did not back down. The meeting continued for hours, going in circles. Hyjin answered some questions about Earth's culture and current population, but refused to discuss anything about the barrier or the architects. By the time the humans returned to their ship, no real progress had been made. That night, Myre could not sleep. She kept thinking about the way Hyjin had spoken. The woman was not hostile, but she was absolutely determined to reveal nothing important. There was fear behind her eyes, though. Fear of something specific. A soft chime at her door made Myre jump. She opened it cautiously and found Sola standing in the corridor, looking nervous. Please do not alert anyone, Sola said quickly. I need to talk to you, alone. Myre pulled her inside. How did you even get here? Your ship left hours ago. I stayed behind. I told them I needed to use the medical facility. Sola sat down heavily. I am taking a huge risk coming here. If Junho finds out, there will be serious consequences. But I cannot stay silent anymore. Why? Myre asked. What is happening on Earth? Sola took a deep breath. I cannot tell you everything. I do not even know everything. But I can tell you this much. Earth is not like other worlds. We were changed. The architects changed us. And what they left behind is both a gift and a terrible burden. Before Myre could ask more questions, the door burst open. Junho stood there with 2 security officers, his face dark with anger. Sola, you foolish girl. What have you done? I have done what is right, Sola said, standing up straight. They deserve to know something. We cannot keep everyone in the dark forever. That is not your decision to make. Junho grabbed her arm roughly. You are coming back to Earth immediately. Prime Coordinator Hyjin will decide your punishment. The incident nearly destroyed the fragile diplomatic relationship. Dao spent hours smoothing things over with Junho, promising that Myre would not share whatever Sola had told her. But the damage was done. Trust between humans and the assembly was now even more strained. Meanwhile, Dao had his medical team analyzing the scans they had taken of the 3 humans. What they found was disturbing. Human biology was mostly normal, but there were small differences. Their neural tissue had an unusual density. Their cells contained trace amounts of an unknown energy that the scanners could barely detect. They have been modified, the medical officer reported. These changes are not natural evolution. Someone designed these alterations with great precision. Taman studied the human technology they could observe from orbit. Look at this pattern, he told Myre. Their energy manipulation technology is centuries ahead of where it should be. Their quantum computing is incredibly advanced. But their space travel technology is surprisingly basic. They have not even left their own solar system. Why would they advance in some areas but not others? Myre wondered. Because they were preparing for something specific, Taman said slowly. They focused their development on certain technologies for a reason. Days turned into weeks. The diplomatic fleet remained in orbit while the assembly tried to negotiate with Hyjin. Every conversation went nowhere. The humans were polite, but absolutely refused to explain the real situation. Then something changed. Hyjin sent a message to the Eternal Dawn. She was willing to allow a small delegation to visit Earth's surface, but only to one location, a place called the Archive, built into the Himalayan mountain range. You want to understand? Hyjin said during the transmission. Then come to the Archive. But I warn you, once you know the truth, you cannot unknown it. Once you see what we have been protecting, your entire understanding of the galaxy will change. Daeho accepted immediately. He selected a team of 12, including Myray and Timon. They would take a shuttle down to Earth and finally get some real answers done as they prepared to depart. Sola appeared at the docking bay. She had been confined to the human ship since the incident, but now she stood there in a fresh uniform. I am coming with you, she announced. Hyjin has decided that I should face the consequences of my actions. I will help guide you through the Archive, and I will watch as you learn what I have known my entire life. The shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere. Myray pressed her face against the window, watching cities and forests pass below. This was humanity's home, a world that had been locked away for so long, developing in isolation, carrying secrets that might shake the entire galaxy. They landed on a plateau high in the mountains. The air was thin and cold. Before them stood an enormous structure built directly into the rock face. It was ancient and modern at the same time, with technology seamlessly integrated into natural stone. At the entrance stood an old man with white hair and kind eyes. Welcome, he said softly. I am Bowman, keeper of the Archive. You have come seeking truth. Very well, but be prepared. The truth is heavier than you can imagine. The Archive was larger inside than it appeared from outside. Bowman led the delegation through corridors carved from living rock, lit by soft blue lights that seemed to come from nowhere. The walls were covered with inscriptions in hundreds of languages, some that Daeho recognized and many that he did not. A woman in her 30s joined them as they walked. Her name was Nari, and she carried a data tablet filled with historical records. Her enthusiasm was obvious despite the serious nature of their visit. The Archive contains everything, Nari explained. Every piece of human history. Every decision we made as a species. Every sacrifice. It is all here, preserved forever. They entered a vast circular chamber with a holographic projector in the center. Security Chief Kiwan stood at the entrance, his arms crossed. He was a solid man in his 40s who watched the alien visitors with careful eyes. You may record everything you see here, Bowman said as everyone took their seats. We want you to understand. We want the galaxy to know what happened and why we remained silent for so long. The holographic projector activated. Images filled the air above them. Daeho saw Earth as it had been 3,200 years ago. A world of early cities and developing technology. Humans were just beginning to understand their own planet, let alone the stars beyond. Then the architects arrived. The holograms showed enormous ships appearing in Earth's sky. Ships so advanced that they made current galactic technology look primitive. The architects themselves were tall beings that seemed to be made of living light. They did not speak with mouths, but communicated directly with minds. They came to us in desperation, Bowman narrated quietly. The architects were fleeing, running from something that terrified even them. They called it the consuming silence. The hologram shifted to show other worlds. Beautiful civilizations that Daeho did not recognize. Then he watched in horror as darkness spread across those worlds. It was not natural darkness. It moved with terrible purpose. Where it touched, Technology twisted into impossible shapes. Buildings grew like living things. People stopped being individuals and moved in perfect synchronization, their eyes empty. The consuming silence was not a disease or a weapon, Nari explained, her voice shaking slightly. It was something worse. A force that corrupted the very foundation of consciousness and technology. It spread from species to species, turning entire civilizations into extensions of itself. The architects were the most advanced race in the galaxy, and even they could not stop it. Myrae felt cold fear creeping into her heart. How many civilizations did it destroy? Thousands, Bowman answered. Maybe more. The architects spent centuries fighting it, trying to find a way to kill it permanently. They failed again and again. The silence learned from every attack. It adapted. It grew stronger. The hologram showed the architects arriving at Earth. They were desperate and exhausted. Their once mighty civilization had been reduced to a handful of ships. Then they discovered something unexpected, Bowman continued. Humans had something unique. Our neural structure, the way our brains were organized, made us naturally resistant to the silence's corruption. It could not take hold in our minds the way it did with other species. Timan leaned forward. Why? What made humans different? We still do not fully understand, Nari admitted. Something about our evolution? The way consciousness developed on Earth. Whatever the reason, we were immune. And the architects saw an opportunity. The hologram showed architects meeting with human leaders. Long negotiations, arguments, fear and hope mixing together. They made us an offer, Bowman said softly. They had developed a weapon, a device that could permanently destroy the silence by resetting certain fundamental aspects of reality in the affected areas. But the weapon required something special to activate. It needed minds that the silence could not corrupt. It needed humans. Deho felt his breath catch. They wanted to use you as weapons. More than that, Bowman gestured, and the hologram showed the interior of human bodies transforming at a cellular level. They wanted to modify us, enhance our natural immunity, link our entire species to the weapon through a network buried deep beneath Earth's surface. Every human would become a living key. Together, we could activate the weapon and purge the silence from the galaxy. But there was a cost. Sola spoke up, her voice bitter. There was always a cost. The hologram showed simulations. Numbers. Terrible calculations. Nari read them aloud. To activate the weapon properly, billions of humans would need to link their minds together. The process would be traumatic, dangerous. The architects calculated that somewhere between 30 and 40% of participants would die from the neural strain. The chamber fell silent. Myrae felt sick. They asked you to sacrifice billions of your own people? They asked us to make a choice, Bowman corrected gently. Accept the modifications, shelter the weapon, and be ready if the silence ever returned. In exchange, they would seal Earth away from the galaxy. Protect us. Give us time to grow strong enough to bear this burden. Or refuse and watch as the silence eventually consumed everything. What did your ancestors say? Deho asked, though he already knew the answer. The hologram showed a massive global vote. Billions of humans participating in the most important decision their species would ever make. The results appeared. 73% in favor of accepting. They said yes, Bowman replied. Not because they wanted to, but because they could not stand by and let the galaxy die. So the architects modified us. They altered our genetics. They built the weapon network beneath our planet. They taught us how to maintain it, how to prepare for the day we might need to use it. The hologram showed the final days. The architects working frantically to complete the barrier. The silence was getting closer, following them to Earth. They sealed the planet just in time. Creating an impenetrable wall, that would hide Earth's signature from the silence's senses. The architects stayed outside, Nari said, tears in her eyes. They drew the silence away from Earth, leading it in other directions. We do not know what happened to them. They never returned. Kiwan finally spoke from his position at the door. For 3,000 years, we prepared. Generation after generation maintaining the weapon network. Training. Making sure that if the silence ever came back, we would be ready to stop it. Even if it meant killing billions of our own people. The hologram faded. The chamber returned to normal lighting. Bowman looked at each alien visitor in turn. Now you understand why we remained silent. The barrier was not a prison. It was a shield. It protected you from the silence by hiding the weapon's signature. It protected us from having to make the terrible choice before we were ready. But now the barrier is gone, and we do not know if the silence is still out there. Myray stood up, her legs shaking. How do you activate the weapon? What is the process? There are activation chambers across Earth, Nari explained. Billions of them. When the time comes, people enter the chambers, and their consciousness is linked through the quantum network. Their minds merge into a single purpose. The weapon channels that unified mental energy and releases a pulse that propagates faster than light. Everywhere it touches, the silence's corruption is undone. Reality is restored, and the people in the chambers? Taman asked quietly. Some survive the experience, Bowman said. Many do not. Those who do survive are changed forever. They never fully disconnect from the network. Parts of their mind remain linked to every other survivor. Deho thought about what he was hearing. An entire species living under the shadow of this burden. Knowing that they might one day need to sacrifice billions of their own people to save everyone else. Does the current population know about this? He asked. Everyone knows, Sola answered. We are taught about it as children. The archive's knowledge is public. Every human grows up understanding that we might be called upon to make the sacrifice. It is part of our culture now. Part of who we are. Bowman stood slowly, his old bones creaking. Now you see why we could not simply tell you everything immediately. This knowledge is a burden. You will go back to your people and tell them what we are, what we carry. Some will fear us. Some will want to destroy the weapon. Some will want to force us to use it for their own purposes. But the choice of when and if to activate the weapon belongs to humanity alone. That was our ancestors' condition, and we will not break it. The delegation left the archive in silence. They returned to their shuttle with heavy hearts and minds full of impossible truths. As they lifted off from the mountain plateau, Myray looked back at the ancient structure. Humanity had been protecting the galaxy for 3,000 years, and nobody had even known. The news from the archive spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within days, every major civilization knew the truth about Earth and the weapon hidden beneath its surface. The reactions were exactly what Bowman had predicted. Fear, suspicion, anger, and desperate hope. Deho stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dawn, watching reports flood in from across the galaxy. The Galactic Assembly was in chaos. Some representatives demanded that Earth be quarantined again. Others wanted military control of the weapon. A few brave voices called for patience and cooperation. Young Mi, Earth's chief scientist, had been brought to the flagship to help explain the technical aspects of the weapon. She was a brilliant woman in her late 30s, with tired eyes that suggested too many sleepless nights. Beside her sat Seok, a nervous young network technician who understood the quantum systems better than almost anyone. The weapon cannot be controlled by force, Young Mi explained to a gathering of military commanders. It requires willing participation. If you tried to force humans to activate it, the mental coherence would fail. The pulse would not generate properly. You would kill billions of people for nothing. An insectoid admiral named Vexith clicked his mandibles aggressively. Then perhaps we should destroy it. Remove the temptation entirely. Why should one species hold such power? Because we are the only ones who can use it, Seok spoke up, his voice shaking but determined. The architects built it specifically for human neural patterns. Any other species would die instantly if they tried to link with the network. The arguments continued for hours. Daeho tried to keep the peace, but tensions were rising. Then, on the third day after the archive revelation, everything changed. A colony on the outer rim went silent. The world of Krevix Prime, home to 3 million people, simply stopped responding to all communications. Scout ships were dispatched to investigate. What they found was nightmare fuel. The colony had been transformed. Buildings had grown organic extensions, forming impossible geometric patterns. Technology had merged with flesh. The colonists were still alive, technically, but they moved in perfect synchronization. They spoke in unified voices, saying the same words at exactly the same moment. Their eyes were empty of individual thought. The consuming silence has returned, Daeho whispered when he saw the footage. Within hours, 2 more colonies reported similar transformations. Then 5 more. Then a dozen. The pattern was spreading exponentially. The silence was moving through the galaxy like a plague, and it was moving toward the core systems, where most of the population lived. Myray worked frantically with Taemin to analyze the spread pattern. It is not random, she said, pointing at the star chart. Look, it is following the routes that our diplomatic ships took. We led it here. The barrier falling was like a beacon. The silence followed the signal right to us. On Earth, Haijin called an emergency global meeting. Billions of humans participated in the virtual assembly, their faces serious and afraid. Junho stood beside her, no longer suspicious of aliens, but focused on the threat. The time we prepared for has come, Haijin announced. The consuming silence is active and spreading. The Galactic Assembly has formally requested our help. We must vote on whether to activate the weapon. The debate that followed was unlike anything in human history. People argued passionately on both sides. Some said they had no right to refuse when billions of innocent lives were at stake. Others said the cost was too high, that sacrificing 4 billion humans was an impossible choice. Bowman, weak with age but still sharp of mind, addressed the assembly. Our ancestors bore this burden in silence for 3,000 years. They lived their entire lives knowing this day might come. Now it has arrived, and we must choose. Do we activate the weapon and save the galaxy at terrible cost to ourselves? Or do we refuse and watch everything burn? While Earth debated, the silence continued to spread. Admiral Vexith grew impatient with the diplomatic process. He gathered support from several militant species and hatched a plan. If humanity would not activate the weapon voluntarily, then he would force them to do it. He would threaten Earth itself until they had no choice. JUNHO discovered the plot through intelligence channels. He immediately contacted Taemin. Your admiral is planning a coup. He has 50 warships preparing the jump to Earth. He plans to hold our cities hostage. Taemin was horrified. This was exactly the kind of scenario that would destroy any chance of cooperation. He went directly to Daeho. You must stop Vexith, Taemin urged. If he attacks Earth, humanity will never trust the galaxy again. They will refuse to help out of spite, and we will all die. Daeho knew Taemin was right. He gathered loyal ships and raced to intercept Vexith's fleet before it could reach Earth. The confrontation happened in deep space, far from any inhabited systems. Stand down. Admiral, Daeho broadcast to Vexith's flagship. You are committing an act of war against Earth. They have a responsibility, Vexith replied coldly. We are dying while they debate philosophy. I will make them act. The standoff lasted for hours. More ships arrived from both sides. Junho brought several human defense vessels to support Deo. It looked like the galaxy might tear itself apart in civil war before the silence even reached the core worlds. Then new data came in from Youngmi and Seok. They'd been studying the silences, spread pattern, and made a terrifying discovery. It is learning, Youngmi reported, her face pale. Every time it consumes a new species, it absorbs their knowledge. It is adapting faster than before. At this rate, it will reach the core worlds in 17 days. And by then, it will be much harder to stop. Seok pulled up calculations on his screen. We have been running simulations of the weapon's effectiveness. If we wait too long, if the silence becomes too widely distributed, the weapon might not be strong enough to purge it completely. We have a window, maybe 2 weeks. After that, even our sacrifice might not be enough. The news broke the deadlock. Vexith, faced with the reality that his actions were wasting precious time, reluctantly stood down. He returned his fleet to defensive positions. On Earth, the global vote concluded. 71% in favor of activation. It was a slimmer majority than their ancestors had given, but it was enough. Humanity had made its choice. Hajin addressed the galaxy from the archive. We will activate the weapon. But understand this. 4 billion of our people will die. Maybe more. We do this not because you forced us, but because it is right. Because the silence is evil and must be stopped. We ask only one thing in return. That you remember what we did. That you honor the sacrifice. And that you never forget that Earth stood between you and oblivion. Preparations began immediately. The activation chambers around the world powered up for the first time in 3,000 years. People said goodbye to their families, knowing that many would not survive. Youngmi and Seok worked around the clock to ensure the systems were functioning properly. Meanwhile, Daeho assembled every military ship in the galaxy. They would form a defensive line, buying Earth as much time as possible. Taemin volunteered to lead the defense of Earth's orbital space. The silence was 18 systems away and closing fast. Its corrupted fleets moved with terrible efficiency, consuming everything in their path. Myre stood on the observation deck of the Eternal Dawn, watching Earth rotate slowly below. Somewhere down there, billions of people were preparing to give their lives for a galaxy that had only known about them for a few months. They are the bravest species I have ever encountered, she said softly. Daeho stood beside her, his reptilian face grim. They are what we should all aspire to be. When faced with impossible choices, they chose sacrifice over safety. They chose others over themselves. The countdown began. 3 days until activation. The galaxy held its breath and prayed that humanity's ancient burden would be enough to save them all. The activation chambers opened across Earth like flowers blooming at dawn. Billions of humans entered them voluntarily, lying down on platforms that would connect them to the ancient network. In cities and villages, on space stations and lunar colonies, people prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice. Sola held her young niece Jiwon close before entering her assigned chamber. The 10-year-old girl had tears streaming down her face. Why do you have to go, Aunt Sola? Jiwon asked. Why cannot someone else do it? Sola knelt down and wiped the tears from her niece's cheeks. Because I have seen the galaxy now. I have met people from other worlds. They are good people, Jiwon. They have families, just like ours. They tell stories and laugh and love. I cannot let them die when I have the power to save them. Junho stood nearby with his own family. His wife and 2 children were also entering chambers. The statistical models showed his entire family was in the high-risk category. with less than 30% survival chance. But they had all voted yes anyway. I was wrong about the aliens, Junho admitted to his wife as they prepared to separate. I thought they would be our enemies. But Daeho and his people have fought beside us. They have protected us. If we survive this, I want to help build bridges between our worlds. Across the planet, similar scenes played out. Mothers kissing children goodbye. Friends embracing one final time. Elderly people lying down peacefully, glad they could contribute. Young people terrified but determined. Bowman entered one of the chambers at the archive. Nari protested, begging him to stay out of the network. "You are too old," she cried. "Your survival chance is nearly zero." "Exactly why I should participate," Bowman replied gently. "Better an old man like me than a young person with their whole life ahead. Besides, I have carried this knowledge for 60 years. It is time I did more than just remember it." Young Me oversaw the activation sequence from a control center deep underground. Seok worked beside her, his fingers flying across holographic interfaces. Around them, dozens of other technicians monitored the systems. "All chambers are online," Seok reported. "Neural pathway connections are stable. Quantum coherence is building. We are at 92% participation rate." "That is higher than we expected," Youngmi said, surprised. "The models predicted 85% maximum." "People want to help," Seok replied simply. "Even those not required volunteered anyway. They want to be part of this." Above the planet, the defensive line held. Daeho commanded a fleet of 10,000 ships from every species in the galaxy. They formed a barrier between Earth and the approaching silence. Taemin piloted a fighter squadron near Earth's orbital stations. The corrupted fleets of the silence arrived like a dark tide. Ships that had once been normal vessels now twisted into organic shapes. They moved with unified purpose, attacking in perfect coordination. The battle was desperate and brutal. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes. Taemin flew with reckless skill, dodging corrupted fighters that tried to ram him. Daeo's flagship took heavy damage but held its position. "How much time do they need?" Vexith asked over the communication channel. For once, his voice held no anger, only desperate determination. 12 more minutes, Daeho replied. "We must hold for 12 minutes. 8 ships exploded in the first minute, 19 in the second. The casualties mounted terribly, but no one retreated. They had all seen what the silence did to civilizations. They knew what was at stake. On Earth, the activation reached its final stage. 7.2 billion humans lay connected to the network. Their individual consciousnesses began to merge, minds touching in ways that had never been possible before. It was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. Sola felt herself dissolving into something larger. She could feel Bowman's wisdom, Junho's protective nature, her niece somewhere safe watching through screens. She could feel strangers she had never met, all of them joining together for one single purpose. The weapon network came fully online. Deep beneath Earth's crust, machinery built by the architects 3,000 years ago activated. It drew power from the quantum coherence of billions of linked minds. "Firing in 10 seconds, Youngmi announced, her voice shaking. Seok gripped the control panel, tears running down his face. The weapon fired. It was not visible to the eye. The pulse moved faster than light, propagating outward from Earth in an expanding sphere of corrective reality. Where it touched the silence's corruption, fundamental aspects of space-time were reset to their original state. Daeho watched as the corrupted ships in front of him suddenly stopped moving. The organic growths withered and fell away. The technology returned to normal. Inside those ships, people woke up from a nightmare, confused and traumatized but free. The pulse continued expanding. It reached the silence-controlled colonies. Buildings returned to their original shapes. People stopped moving in synchronization and fell to the ground, gasping for air as their minds became their own again. The waves spread across the galaxy. Every system the silence had touched was cleansed. The corrupted technology was restored. The transformed beings were freed. The silence itself, that ancient evil that had destroyed thousands of civilizations, simply ceased to exist. In the activation chambers on Earth, the cost became clear. 4 billion people did not wake up. Their minds had burned out from the strain of the connection. They died peacefully, still linked to the network, their final thoughts joining with the weapon's pulse. Bowman was among them. So was young me. John Ho survived, but his wife and children did not. He woke up screaming their names, knowing they were gone. Sola lived, but felt forever changed. Part of her mind remained connected to the network, sensing the other survivors, even when she was alone. Seok survived as well, though he would never be quite the same. He could feel the quantum network humming in the back of his mind, a constant reminder of what they had done. When the final counts came in, the number was 3.8 billion dead. More than predicted, but less than feared. The survivors emerged from their chambers to find a world that had been transformed by grief and victory. The galaxy fell silent in mourning. Ships from every species lowered their flags. Monuments were planned. The names of the 4 billion would be recorded in every major city in the galaxy. Haijin, who had not participated in the network due to her leadership duties, addressed the survivors. We have done what our ancestors prepared us for. We have honored their memory and saved the galaxy. But the price was beyond anything I can put into words. We will carry this grief forever, and we will make sure that those who died are never forgotten. 10 years passed. Earth had changed in ways both obvious and subtle. Humans now served as wardens, individuals whose partial connection to the network allowed them to detect reality corruption before it could spread. They traveled throughout the galaxy, protecting other species from similar threats. Myra completed her magnum opus, a comprehensive history titled The Price of Tomorrow. It became required reading in schools across 1,000 worlds. She made sure that everyone understood what humanity had sacrificed. Sola became Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Assembly. She traveled from world to world, building relationships and ensuring that the galaxy remembered. By her side was Jiwon, now 20 years old, training to follow in her aunt's footsteps. Haijin spent her final years tending a memorial garden. 4 billion names were inscribed on a monument that stretched for miles. She walked among them every day, reading names aloud, making sure they were remembered as individuals, not just statistics. JUNHO trained a joint defense force, combining human and alien military tactics. He made sure that no species would ever face extinction alone again. Sometimes his students asked about his family. He always told them the truth, turning his grief into purpose. Daeho visited Earth every year on the anniversary of the activation. He brought representatives from grateful worlds, and they stood in silence at the memorial garden. His friendship with Junho had grown deep, built on shared trauma and mutual respect. Nari continued her work at the archive, now expanded to include the stories of the billions who had participated in the activation. She collected personal accounts, final messages, anything that would preserve their memory. It became the most visited site in the galaxy. The quantum network remained active beneath Earth's surface, no longer a weapon but a memorial. The 3 billion survivors who remained connected could feel each other across vast distances, a permanent reminder of what they had done together. Earth was no longer isolated. Ships from hundreds of species visited regularly. Trade agreements were signed. Cultural exchanges flourished. But everyone who came to Earth treated it with a special reverence. This was the world that had stood between civilization and oblivion. This was the planet that had paid the ultimate price. In the archive, in a quiet room that few people visited, Nari discovered something Bowman had left hidden. A final message from the architects, encrypted and buried in the deepest databases. It had taken years to decode. The message was simple but profound. Thank you for finishing what we could not. We are sorry for the burden we placed upon you. In our desperation, we made choices that cost your people dearly. But we also saw in humanity something we had lost in our own species. The willingness to sacrifice for others. The courage to face impossible choices. Asterisk.